Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for March the 4th. Today we are reading together in we're reading together the 28th Psalm, Psalm number 28. It has the heading of My Strength, which probably goes along well with Psalm 27. A lot of people draw a number of connections from Psalm 27 and Psalm 28 together. But this is my strength. This is a Psalm of David. I would probably classify this as a Psalm of Lament, which, unsurprisingly, since we've seen this a number of times in Psalms of Lament up to this point, that they pivot to praise and thanksgiving. And I think we see that in beginning in verse number 6. So the first 5 verses focusing on lament, the last 4 verses, focusing on a pivot toward praise and thanksgiving. Let me get the psalm up on the text for us, or let me get the text up on the screen for us, and we'll read along together here. Psalm number 28. Psalm number 28, in verse number 1, Yahweh, I call to you. My rock, do not be deaf to me. If you remain silent to me, I will be like those going down to the pit. Listen to the sound of my pleading when I cry to you for help, when I lift up my hands toward your holy sanctuary. Do not drag me away with the wicked, with the evildoers, who speak in friendly ways with their neighbors, while malice is in their hearts. Repay them according to what they have done, according to the evil of their deeds. Repay them according to the work of their hands. Give them back what they deserve, because they do not consider what Yahweh has done, or the works of his hands. He will tear them down and not rebuild them. Blessed be Yahweh, for he has heard the sound of my pleading. Yahweh is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart celebrates, and I give thanks to him with my song. Yahweh is the strength of his people. He is a stronghold of salvation for his anointed. Save your people, bless your possession, shepherd them, and carry them forever. Psalm number 28, a psalm of David. Lord, I call to you. My rock, do not be deaf to me. Sometimes we, I believe, can assume rightly based upon the Psalms that we've looked at so far. There were times in David's life whenever he cried out to Yahweh, and it seemed to him as if Yahweh was not hearing him. So we have probably here an honest perception of what the situation looked like from David's perspective. For him, someone who greatly trusted in Yahweh and relied upon him for everything, it probably did not take very much for David to cry out to Yahweh, expressing the fact that I need you. That seems to be one of David's greatest and most often expressed sentiments within the Psalter is I need you. Do not be deaf to me when I call. So do not fail to hear my crying out to you. Because here's the deal: if you remain silent to me, if that's what happens, then I might as well die. From David's perspective, if he did not have Yahweh, he might as well die because there was no one who could deliver him like his God. So the plea again in verse number 2, listen to the sound of my pleading. There's a crying to Yahweh from David in verse number 1. There is a pleading for him in verse number 2. There's a crying out to him, verse number 2 in line number 2. There is a lifting up of hands toward Yahweh's holy sanctuary. What is the lifting up of hands? Lifting up of hands, asking for help, asking for God's provision, asking for God to intervene. So verses 1 and 2 set the scene for us. David in some sort of predicament, crying out to Yahweh, the only one to whom he was willing to go, the only one whom he believed had the ability to intervene and to save him. So please listen then. This is how we might transition then from verses 1 and 2 to verse number 3. Listen so I don't end up like evil men. Because from David's perspective, God did not listen to evil men. So do not drag me away with the wicked. Those who you punish, don't let me be caught up with them because I'm not like these people. I don't belong to them. I don't belong with the wicked. I don't belong with the evildoers. These are people who speak in friendly ways with their neighbors while malice is in their hearts. They're two-faced. They are hypocrites. They portray one thing to people's faces, but they have another thing. They have another idea completely differently within their hearts, full of malice, not love for their neighbor, but malice for their neighbor. So from David's perspective, repay them according to what they have done, according to the evil of their deeds. Repay them according to the work of their hands. Give them back what they deserve. Here's David trusting that Yahweh, that his justice would be carried out. So David here doesn't say, allow me to punish them. David doesn't have to say that. He trusts in Yahweh to be able to punish the wicked, to be able to, in his perfect justice, to bless those who trust in him, but then to punish those who rebel against him. Because verse number 5, they do not consider what you have done. They don't consider the work of your hands. They're not like those who seek to know you and to trust you and to have a relationship with you. They ignore you. It reminds me of those. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. I'm going to say it's Psalm 14. Psalm 14. Yeah, Psalm 14 and verse number 1. The fool says in his heart, there's no God. They are corrupt. They do vile deeds. There's no one who does good. That seems this right here, verse number 5 of Psalm 28, seems to be that type of person. It's not the type of person who just denies the existence of God. Remember, everybody at this time believed in deity, and the idea of not believing in something supernatural or not believing in some sort of deity is really more of a more modern type of thing. That simply wasn't the case during the days of David, thousands of years ago. Everybody believed in God or some sort of deity, some sort of God. So it's something they don't believe in God, but they just don't believe he's going to do anything. They I should say, it's not that they did not believe in him, they did not have any respect for him. They did not have respect, like we see here in verse number 5. They did not have respect for what he has done. They did not have respect for the work of his hands. So again, David's confidence is in Yahweh that you're going to tear them down and you're not going to build them back up. So David laments here that it seems as if God, at least from his perspective, maybe is not hearing his pleas and his cries, and he doesn't want to be swept away with evildoers. But then, as there often is in these Psalms of Lament, there's a pivot toward praise and thanksgiving. Blessed, verse number 6, blessed be Yahweh, for he has heard the sound of my pleading. We see this all the time within the Psalter. The way these Psalms of Lament develop, that on the front end, and I remember too, I would venture a guess to say that these psalms are probably often written after the events themselves. So the author is looking back on the situation and sees that, hey, at the beginning I felt abandoned. At the beginning I felt alone. At the beginning it felt like Yahweh wasn't hearing me, and this then is the result of that type of feeling. But then he looks back at the end of the day, and if the situation has played out completely, and he says, oh no, Yahweh actually did hear me. He has heard the sound of my pleading. Yahweh is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart celebrates. My heart celebrates, and I give thanks to him with my song. You know what? At the end of the day, David says, Yahweh did hear me. And he is, as I said earlier, he is my rock. Now I recognize as well, he is my strength. He is my shield. And I am helped because I trust in him. The trust that he displayed in verses 1 and 2, it ends up paying out. It ends up paying off for him as the situation plays out. That trust, that confidence in verses 1 and 2 is well founded and shown to be a benefit and a blessing to him. So David's going to celebrate. David's going to give thanks, and he's going to do so through song, which of course David was a very accomplished musician. Finally, verses 8 and 9, Yahweh is the strength of his people. So not just David, but David recognizes that Yahweh is the strength of the entire people, all of his covenant people, not just David as his king, but the entire covenant people as a whole. He is a stronghold of salvation for his anointed. So there's the king right there. There's the king idea. He is the strength of the people. He is the stronghold of salvation for the anointed, for his king. So based upon the evidence, David has a final plea, has a final great request. Yahweh, save your people. Bless your possession. Shepherd them and carry them forever. Carry them forever. What we see working between verses 2 and 9. Again, verse 2, listen to the sound of my pleading when I cry to you for help, when I lift up my hands toward your holy sanctuary. When we lift up our hands to God in prayer in a moment of great need, he then will lift us up. He then will save us. He then will bless us. He then will shepherd us. He then will carry us, so long as our faith remains stayed in him. Let me ask us, do we recognize God as our rock? Do we recognize him as our strength? Do we recognize him as our shield? Do we recognize him as the stronghold of salvation? Do we recognize those things about our God? If not, why not? Why do we not recognize God as these things? Is that because we have not grown in our understanding of who he is and the character that he has? We haven't grown enough in that to be able to have the faith that this is who he truly is. Let me tell you, if we feel like we've not had enough evidence presented before us to determine that this is who God is, then let me just encourage you, if you haven't been going through the Psalter with this so far, just begin back at Psalm number 1 and catch up with us here to Psalm 28. Read about all the different times that the authors have spoken of God being a rock, a strength, a shield, a stronghold, a fortress, a deliverer. The Psalter is full of these declarations about Yahweh. But so are the stories of the Old Testament. Considering we're in the Old Testament right now, the stories of the Old Testament are full and replete with stories of how God shows himself to have these characteristics about him. If we don't have the faith yet to know that this is who God is, then we need to grow in our knowledge and we need to grow in our trust so that our faith can get to the point where we, in times of lament, like David was here within this psalm in the beginning, so whenever we are in the same sort of positions, that we will respond as David does, crying out to him, lifting up our hands for help, for strength, for deliverance in times of need. If you have any questions about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me on this Monday morning. We'll be back at it again on Wednesday, reading together from Psalm 29, which is entitled The Voice of Yahweh. This is another Psalm of David. Looking forward to reading that with you then. Take care and God bless.